All right, what I've got here is a quick overview of some of the heart murmurs. Trying to get this down, so I try to put this together. So, if you remember these different axes, it can make it easy to remember some details of how it works. Okay, so the main thing you need to get down is that the top here is all mitral, and the bottom down here is all aorta. Okay, so aortic. So up here, the top row is mitral, bottom row is aortic. So if it's mitral, you're going to hear it better towards the apex of the heart, and if it's aortic, it's down towards the bottom, you're going to hear it better towards the base. So mitral and apex go together, and aortic and base go together. So then the next thing to get down is whether or not you hear this during diastole, whether it's diastolic, or whether you hear it better during systole, whether it's systolic. So you see here the left column is diastolic and the right column is systolic. Okay, so everything in the right column is going to have systolic in it, and everything in the left is going to be diastolic. So then the thing to get down is this diagonal axis here. The one going from the top left to the bottom right is stenosis, and the one going from the bottom left to the top right is insufficiency. So if you remember that the guy on the bottom here is insufficient, so he always stays down in the base. Kind of happy things in the bottom are all base. The base is in the bottom, and people that feel insufficient like to hide in the bottom. So they're insufficiency and base towards the bottom. Okay, so now let's put this together. So top left box here is going to be mitral stenosis, right? So, because remember that was this axis here, so mitral stenosis. It's heard best during diastole, because that's where it matches up with this column. And if it's mitral, it's heard best in the apex. So mitral stenosis, you hear it during diastole, and you hear it in the apex. Now, some other little things about this is also everything in the left column here is also going to be rumbling. So if you remember that people who die, diastolic, people who die rumble a little bit when they fall to the ground. So diastolic is going to be rumbling. So everything here that's diastolic is also rumbling. So mitral stenosis occurs during diastole, heard best in the apex. It's going to have an opening snap, and it's going to be rumbling. So opening snap, you just kind of think like this is the first one. It's the very top left. The very first thing that happens is going to pop open, opening snap. So it's not really the first one in order or anything, whatever. It's the first one I'm talking about it because it's the top left. So just think of that, the one on the very top left has an opening snap. And the very last one that I talk about, which is going to be aortic stenosis, is going to be the crescendo, decrescendo. So think it's kind of, the sound is kind of going away, decrescendo. So the last one is crescendo, decrescendo, and the first one I talk about is the opening snap. So hopefully we've got that. Now, how can you remember these different columns? I already helped you with the insufficiency, insufficient kind of being the bottom left corner, stenosis being on the top left. As far as mitral being on top versus aortic being on the bottom, you could think A, mitral, and aortic, or you could just think about what kind of way the heart's positioned. And then diastole and systole, DS, I don't know how you can remember that. Maybe D comes before S in the alphabet. There you go. Okay, so we've talked about mitral stenosis occurring during diastole, which is apex, and has an opening snap, and it's rumbling. Now we're going to skip over here to this little middle box here. I won't skip. Let's hit this little middle box. There's one that kind of is in between the two here. It's mitral prolapse. Okay, so I put this in here because it also has an opening snap, because it's very similar to mitral stenosis, right? So it also has an opening snap and also has rumbling. So it has these qualities of this one, but it occurs during systole. Okay, if I go in heart dynamics and explain why that is, but just take my word for it for now, because I don't feel like going into it. So it occurs during systole. Okay, so it's kind of in the middle here because it does have the opening snap. It happens during rumbling, but it's in the middle because it occurs during systole over here. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go with this column here, the systolic column, on the mitral apex row. So we have mitral insufficiency. Why insufficiency? Because if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, the arrow pointing up, everything along this diagonal axis is going to have insufficiency in it. So this is mitral insufficiency. Occurs during systole and happens at the apex. Okay. Now we're going to go down here into the aortic base and diastolic rumbling column and row. So this is aortic insufficiency. Why insufficiency? Because the bottom left-hand corner we have insufficiency, and the we also have it being diastole because it's in the first column, and it happens at the base because everything in the aortic is base, and it's rumbling because it's diastolic and rumbling go together. So aortic insufficiency happens during diastole, occurs in the base, and it's rumbling. Now our last one, aortic stenosis, it's stenosis because it's along the stenosis diagonal axis here. Happens at the base because it's on the bottom, and it's the last one, so it's got the crescendo decrescendo. Of course, it happens during systole because it's on the second column. So hopefully that kind of clears things up for you and helps this all.